Morning, everybody. I'm just going to introduce myself, not to the people on the screen, but to people who are going to be watching. I'm Lucy Garrett QC, and I am member of the Pupillage Committee and have been for many, many years. And I am here with 3 junior members of Chambers, and we're going to have a bit of a chat about the pupillage application process and highs and lows of pupillage, and a little bit about the first year of tenancy at Keating. So I'm going to just go around the screen clockwise from what I can see, which means Harriet, it's you first to introduce yourself.
So I'm Harriet Di Francesco. Thank you, Lucy. I am at first year of tenancy, and I did my pupillage at Keating Chambers.
Great. John is next on my screen.
I'm John Steele. I've just finished pupillage, so I'm in the early stages of first year of tenancy, and did my pupillage at Keating.
Thank you very much. And Thomas?
Yeah, I'm Thomas Saunders. Like John, I've just finished pupillage at Keating and just started tenancy.
Congratulations again to both of you. Okay, so I'm going to start with Thomas. I'm going to go back around the circle. Thomas, have you got a tip that you can share with the people watching on applying for pupillage and the application process generally?
I think my main tip from my own experience would be not to be disheartened by the process as a whole. I got, I think, 2 interviews through the entire pupillage application process, but one of them was at Keating, and now here I am. It really is something that only takes one successful application. It's very easy to feel like things aren't going well sometimes, but yeah, as I said, it only takes one.
Yeah, absolutely. I would echo that. I got loads of interviews, but they all rejected me. I don't know which one is worse. I don't know whether it's I don't know whether it's worse to sort of fall down at the first hurdle or then be found wanting when they've actually met you. But I agree with that. You've just got to persist, haven't you? And so many people don't get pupillage first time round, who do get it second time round, or get pupillage, don't get taken on, and then go on to do a 3rd, 6th somewhere else and become absolutely brilliant barristers. We actually have a joke in Chambers. Thomas and John probably don't know this yet. We have a joke in Chambers that all the best people in Chambers were rejected either by Chambers or somewhere else before they got tenancy at Keating. Maybe that's just people like me who were rejected that we want to make ourselves feel better. Okay, John, any tips from you?
Well, I think kind of just on the back of that, I think it's quite comforting to have in mind that you are looking for somewhere where you feel at home, where you've got a bit of a connection, and there might be different chambers which you're kind of, in terms of your capability, you're certainly good enough to be there, but you might not kind of feel at home there. You know, I think that you're looking for a fit, so and you'll get that in going to open evenings, which chambers might do, or just through the interview process, meeting people. So I think that's one thing to bear in mind. You are looking for somewhere which is going to suit you, as well as, you know, or it's not just a one-way street, I think, where you'll think you're just going to go anywhere. I think you're really looking for that place where you feel you're going to do your best. And then in terms of tips, I think trying to make the application form and what you say in your interviews kind of interesting, because I haven't sat on the other side yet. I'm sure you'll have something to say on this, Lucy, but if you're going through loads of forms and people are saying the right things but they're not particularly interesting, it's difficult to stand out. So I think my applications changed when I started to try and make them a bit more interesting rather than ticking all the boxes.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, actually. I mean, it's certainly true that when you get, more than 100 applications, and the people who are doing the paper sift are reading them through, it is nice to see something that's a bit more memorable. But I always, whenever I'm asked by candidates about doing the form, one of the things I always say is that you don't have to have the conventional experiences when you're applying to the bar to demonstrate that you're going to be a good advocate or a good barrister. People do lots of mooting and that kind of thing, which is absolutely fantastic, obviously. Shows commitment to the bar, and obviously you're getting some experience of what real advocacy is like. But I didn't have any of that when I was applying, so I had to use things from my life that were nothing to do with the law or being a barrister, because it hadn't actually occurred to me to be a barrister until a year after I graduated from university. And so I had to use stuff that was just unusual in the context of a barrister's application, and I think that actually helped me a lot in the application process, completely inadvertently. It wasn't a strategy in my case, but I think it's a good tip that if you can have a mixture of things on your form, and you can draw experience from things like working in a shop or being a barmaid. I did. You've got to deal with difficult people, you've got to persuade them to do things they don't want to do. That's what we do. So yeah, I agree. I mean, if you can mix it up a bit, that makes your application more memorable. But the thing that we're looking for is demonstration that you've got the skills that you need to be a barrister. But that doesn't have to come from the traditional evidence like moots and so on. Harriet.
Hi, yeah. I think that one important tip really is, and I've only learnt this more recently, is to be self-aware. And so you need to know obviously what your strengths are, and no doubt that's a question that you might be asked in an interview. What are your strengths? But also knowing what your weaknesses are and what it is that you need to do to make yourself better. And that's something that will be an ongoing anxiety throughout pupillage, the application process, pupillage and tenancy. But it's extremely important, and trying to come up with an answer that actually is just another strength doesn't demonstrate that you are self-aware. So I think it is important to understand your strengths, but also your weaknesses. And nobody's perfect. And I think that comes across very well in an interview or in an application when you're able to identify it, but also to also propose a solution.
Yeah, and I suppose in a way that kind of reflects what you have to do in real life as a barrister, and that you've got a set of facts in front of you and they are what they are, and all the wishing in the world won't make them different. So you have to be clear about what the situation actually is and tailor your advice to that. There's one thing I forgot to ask you guys to do when you're introducing yourself, is to just talk a bit about your backgrounds, because I know that we have candidates who will be watching this that come from all kinds of different walks of life. So I thought it might be interesting for them to hear about your sort of journey to the bar, like where you went to school, etc., etc. And I'm going to mix up the order. John, can you give us a couple of minutes on how you got here?
Well, I grew up in the northeast, the South Shields. Went to Newcastle Royal Grammar School, and then went to Edinburgh and did history there. I was pretty keen on becoming a historian, and then went and did a master's, which I thought would feed into that, which did have quite a lot of international law in it, and that was led by a barrister. So I was kind of, from that point on, I was quite interested in going into the law. But immediately after doing that, I had to go and get a job, and so worked in kind of publishing, a think tank, for a year before doing the law conversion. And at that stage, I wasn't really sure if I'd go down the barrister route or go down solicitor route. But it was a law conversion. It was at City University, where there were a lot of opportunities to do mooting and debating, and kind of things I'd been interested in, at least in the debating front at school. And so it was that advocacy element which led me to looking a little bit more at doing a kind of pupillage and going down that route. But from doing the GDL to getting pupillage was a little bit meandering. I worked at a few law firms, trying to get a scholarship from the Inner Temple, and they gave me a scholarship to do the bar course. And then it was only on the bar course that I got pupillage, and then had a year and came in. So that's sort of a précis of how it's been.
I like the meandering path to the bar. It sounds like it took you even longer than it did me to decide you wanted to become a barrister. Like, degree, then postgrad, then another year. Oh, I think I'll do some more training. Tom, give us your potted history.
It's maybe less meandering and more conventional.
Nothing wrong with that. We take conventional as well.
I was brought up in Cambridgeshire. I read philosophy at university, and when I got to the end of that, I realised that I did really like arguing with people about things and getting to grips with arguments, but the topics
The
in
classic horrible person route to the bar.
yeah, exactly.
I have to say, I have the same thing. If I'm going to argue all the time, I want to be paid for it.
Yeah, quite. I wasn't. I didn't think I was cut out for pursuing philosophy further. So I worked for a year at Chambers and Partners, and then did the law conversion course and the bar course at City. And yeah, came once I started that, came through fairly predictably.
Harriet, how about you?
I was more of a meanderer, I think. I studied history at university as well in Sheffield, and did well, and wanted to travel but couldn't afford it, so thought, well, let's do a master's somewhere far away, because I'm set up for that, and I'd like to go far away. So I went to America and studied there, in international relations, mostly economics. So, sort of further away from the law, one might think, but I did specialize in some international law classes and I enjoyed it, but I was more for the human rights type law, and thought about coming back and doing some NGO work or criminal work, but couldn't afford to do either when I got back because I had no money. So I worked similarly to John, in sort of administration type jobs, working in restaurants and things like that. And yeah, did the law conversion, and once I started the law conversion, and I went down that route really because I was still interested in law, but because I had no money, it was less about criminal law and more about commercial law. That was the route from then on, and I had to take some time off in between courses to work and raise money to continue. But I was lucky enough to get scholarships and end up here at Keating. So it was a bit meandering, but I'm glad for it because I got to travel a lot and meet a lot of people, and that was nice.
Yeah, I thought I might want to do human rights, although I wasn't mad enough to want to do criminal when I was starting off. But I ended up at I actually got pupillage in a different chambers to Keating called Two Temple Gardens, which has a much more broad range of work. So I spent pupillage doing loads of different civil stuff and got to sort of pick construction because I totally fell in love with cool cases arising out of contracts. So I was lucky, it turned out, that I didn't sort of try and didn't manage to get into a human rights set first of all, because I think really I'm a contract person in my soul. Okay, so the next question is going to be sort of highs and lows of pupillage, and I'm going to start with John. What was your best and worst thing? And this is not a scripted conversation, everyone that's watching, so I'm actually going to be hearing this for the first time.
I'll start with two lows. One's worse than the other.
Oh God.
So first low, which is not actually the worst low, was day one walking around chambers. You go and you meet everyone, or at least kind of pre-COVID you did. It's very nice and quite formal, but you get to know everyone. But I went into the room with one silk, and it became obvious. I won't name names. He was more interested, in my ability or possible ability to play cricket than necessarily meeting me, because it was a game. So this is on the Monday. There was a game on the Wednesday night for Tech Bar. So I don't know what Tech Bar was, but I was signed up to play Tech Bar.
Oh my God.
So Wednesday night, day 3 in pupillage, I was on the district line out to Kew Green.
Miles away, yeah.
To play Texer, and opened the bowling. I just thought, this is the best day of my life. I shouted to someone else in the outfield, what a brilliant way to spend a Wednesday afternoon. I think he thought I was kind of mad. And then few overs in, I was at fine leg, just behind the wicket keeper. Ball comes out, wicket keeper misses it. I sprint after it, dive, and I fall kind of awkwardly, dislocate my shoulder to throw the ball with my good hand and kind of limp off like a sad cat or an injured bird. And to find myself in the dressing rooms being kind of sorted out by the Texas batsman.
This is great client networking, John. I don't know what you're complaining about.
Well, they sorted me an Uber to Charing Cross Hospital, and
Oh my goodness.
but it wasn't all. It came in the next day with a dislocated shoulder, and I did feel like a bit of a wally, but I kind of had my jacket over me in a kind of faintly Napoleonic sort of guise, and it was quite a good conversation starter. I think if you want to make friends in this country, either get a dog or injure yourself in a kind of minor way. Everyone wants to talk about it. And then best moments were, I actually just enjoyed some of the work where you're being brought into really interesting projects. Like there's a project in the Middle East where it's a huge infrastructure project, and we were going into the client's office, which was in the city, meeting all the engineers who were kind of bringing out they're like printing the parts, that to bring them out. So something had gone wrong in a bit of the metro station, so they kind of had it out, and we were looking at it. And I think that was really engaging. And then going into the Court of Appeal and following barristers from chambers do their thing and talking to them afterwards, I just got that feeling you're really at the coal face, and it was really interesting. So they're the kind of lows and highs, I'd say.
I'll do Harriet next.
Well, worst. We do the worst moment in pupillage really was we do advocacy exercises throughout the year, and I had mooted, but not for a while, and so the notion of firstly doing a skeleton argument in sort of the first few months of pupillage, and then having to defend that skeleton argument in a sort of court setting with a silk who is acting as a judge was absolutely terrifying. So obviously, as I went down and I'm pitched against a junior member of chambers, I had forgotten to bring my printed submissions, had left them in the printer, but didn't realise I had forgotten until the sort of first 3 minutes when I was supposed to be making them. The silk very kindly let me go off, didn't look happy at all. He's a bit of a stickler for the rules, this one, but let me go up, and I ran up and got them obviously sweating profusely as I get back down.
What a nightmare.
As I sit down to do my submissions, I hesitate, and I think, do I need to stand or sit? So I stand. Turns out you're supposed to sit in this particular instance, but I stand, and as I stand, I knock my glass of water all over the table, all over the recently printed and covered in sweat submissions, and essentially have to give my submissions anyway, sort of filtering through these very soggy bits of paper. Everyone's lifting sort of bits of paper off the table. I've wasted about 10 minutes of, quite a strict time limit. And the main bit of feedback at the end, which you get, which is great, this particular silk gave very constructive feedback, was remember to print your submissions. Don't stand up when you don't need to, and don't bring a glass of water. Just don't. So yeah, I learned a lot from that.
Yeah, the glass of water thing happens in court absolutely routinely, and you have to remember to put it, hide it under a box or something, or under somebody's lectern so that you can't knock it over.
It's happened since in court twice to me, and yeah, so I just don't drink. I just go dehydrated for the day now.
Okay, but that's a good thing now, rather than got to balance that horror story.
So the good thing was my first court hearing, and I did that in my second six of pupillage, I think, or it might have been just when I started tenancy, but the lines are blurred. I was for the defendant, and we had a counterclaim. Now, we didn't really have any evidence for our counterclaim, it transpired, and I did try to sort of sneak in a last-minute witness statement with all these photographs. I got to cross-examine someone. That was great. We had a bit of a fight, basically, in the court, but it was all exciting, and we lost you know, abysmally, pretty much. We did manage to get the underlying claim down a little bit, which for me was just a massive victory on a very purely technical point, which the judge loved. In the small,
I love working on technical points.
A really silly technical point. It was very silly, but it's the small claims court, and so anything goes. And at the end, despite the fact that we had lost terribly, the client, the chap who I was defending, took me on the train and bought me a little bottle of wine and a packet of crisps, and we talked about Brexit all the way home. And I felt so guilty that we'd lost. Obviously happy about the tiny victory, but this sort of, you know, hour and a half on the train together was actually quite nice. And I felt that, you know, he actually felt like I'd helped him somehow. So, you know, that was a nice way to start, you know, my real profession.
Thomas. Oh, I don't think either of mine are as funny as any of those.
Yours was like sort of genuinely sad. I'm
genuine problem. So yeah. No. I think my worst moment. I have another interview-based one actually, because it's a very sort of awkward time, and it was again in the first interview. It was in the first interview getting duffed up by John in the debate. No, it was being asked one of those questions that is, oh, can you tell us about a time when you displayed X, Y, Z quality, leadership or teamwork or advocacy skills? I can't remember which quality it was supposed to be that I was supposed to demonstrate. But I was asked it, and I just couldn't think of anything. And I think I felt like I stared out of the window for about 5 minutes.
Was it with us? Is this a story about an interview with us?
It was the first interview at Keating.
I don't remember it. Obviously, I bet it wasn't anywhere. I reckon this is actually quite a good story because it clearly wasn't anywhere near as bad as you thought it was.
Well, clearly not.
No.
But it did go on to the point where I had someone from the panel chipped in and said, and sort of gave me suggestions, something along the lines of, oh, it doesn't have to have been something that happened at work. It can be something that happened at university, or it started giving me suggestions for areas of my life that I might be able to draw an example from. And I did manage in the end to come up with something which clearly wasn't too outrageously forced, but that was quite that was not
it was a bad moment. I can see that would be a painful moment. Yeah,
never fun to feel like you just don't have an answer. And the best moment, I think, during Pupillage was probably, like Harriet, the sort of first bit of real work of my own. I mean, obviously because of COVID and everything, what should have been my first hearing that ended up being adjourned off, and in fact still hasn't happened 6 months later.
Yeah.
But the first pleading that I did in my name, went out with my name at the bottom of it. That was probably one of the best moments.
That is a cool moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's terrifying. No, you're like, oh god,
oh, yeah, so terrifying. Somebody
read it and tell me it's not wrong, please.
I think I probably really harassed my supervisor, in the days during which I was preparing it, just saying, I've changed one full stop and 2 semicolons. Can you read the whole thing again?
Yeah, I think when I was starting off, I had a sort of, I don't know whether you guys had a sort of similar experience. You spend obviously a year with your pupil supervisors doing stuff that's far too hard for you, just incomprehensibly difficult, and you're sort of struggling, clawing your way up the mountain to understand 80% of the issues or something. That's what you're sort of aiming for, and then you start, and your actual cases are not always, but by and large, more simple because they're smaller, and you sort of have this weird feeling of, oh, there's like 6 issues in this case, and I actually know what they are. And so you have the kind of balance of, it's easier than all the work you've been doing for the last year, but obviously it's your first on your own, so you're completely terrified nonetheless. It's a bizarre balance when you're first starting off. And actually that leads us on to the next thing I was going to ask Harriet, because she's a year in, and that was going to be, what's it been like your first year? Obviously a bit of a weird year because we've obviously had end times, but how's it been?
Yeah, I mean, it's been, I've learned so much. This is when you really learn, because you're on your own, and obviously it's on you, and there's no one over your shoulder checking what you're doing, or to check that you've got it right or wrong, or give you feedback. So obviously that comes with its own, you know, set of anxieties, but also challenges that are really exciting. And it has been, in terms of how busy I've been sometimes really busy, and then sometimes not that busy. And you know, you're very unlikely to have a sort of middle way, you know, situation where you just have the perfect
practice,
level.
I'm afraid it doesn't
Exist.
The Goldilocks practice, not a thing.
No, and it's so unique. I mean, I've done all sorts of different jobs and thought about all sorts of different careers and tried things, and nothing is, as far as I know, is quite like this, because it's obviously you're self-employed, and there are many different jobs in which you can be self-employed, but the challenge is just great. And the different things, especially with construction law, that you really have to get your teeth into the facts as well as the law. And you know, you're reading structural engineering reports and you basically have no idea what they're talking about, but having a conference with somebody who then explains things to you, which you're just going to forget in about 3 weeks time anyway. But you know, I know that it's going to continue to be like this, at least for, you know, 5-10 years, just constantly learning stuff. And obviously
no,
Lucy,
it's longer than that, Harriet. It
exactly.
just carries on and on, I'm afraid.
I was going to ask, like, it's,
yeah,
and that's the beauty. It's the beauty of it. I think it's the beauty of it, isn't it? It's you're never really bored. I mean, there might be, you know, 900 pages into a structural engineering report, you might get quite bored, obviously. But you know, I get up in the morning knowing that I've got a challenge ahead of me. You know, and that has ups and downs, obviously. But
yeah, I remember talking to Silk in my first chambers when I just got taken on, and saying that I was petrified every single day. It was at Jeremy Stewart Smith, then QC, now Lord Justice, and he was obviously, from my point of view, just impossibly grand and senior, and floating on a cloud of ultra competence and enormous pulsing brain stuff. And I was saying to him, Jeremy, no, I just every day I'm terrified. And he said to me, Lucy, I am still waiting for the hand to land on my shoulders to say, that's it for you, mate. We've caught you out. You're actually rubbish. That's Jeremy Stewart Smith.
It's ominous. Yeah, it's the imposter thing, isn't it? It's, you know,
yeah, everyone has it, and you know, you just carry on anyway. Fake it till you make it. That's the bar.
I agree.
Well, thank you very much, guys. That was absolutely excellent. Morning, both of you. Hi, Adam. Hi, Wenjin. I'm gonna do what I did last time and ask both of you to just introduce yourselves and talk about where you're at in chambers in your amazing barrister life. Ads, I'll start with you.
Hi, my name's Adam Constable, QC. I'm a Silk at Keating Chambers. I've been at Keating for 18 years. I started off in a general common law set and moved across at about 7 years call, where life had taken me in a direction of construction law and that sort of thing, and so moved to this this fantastic set that does, you know, nothing but all things technical. And here I am 18 years later as now sadly slightly grey-haired Silk.
Only a little bit grey haired, Ads. Wenjin, how about you?
Well, hi, my name's Wenjin Tae. My experience isn't quite as extensive as Adam's. I graduated from university last year, and I did the BPTC, and I just started Pupillage about a month ago. The start of a long and hopefully fruitful journey.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So I think I'm going to do the first question to Adam, which is, can you tell the people watching what sort of at a high level what Chambers is looking for and how the recruitment process works?
Sure, absolutely fine. Well, what I'll start off with is saying what we're not looking for, and we're not looking for someone who has extensive or need any experience of construction law. We realise that we are a specialist set, and we don't expect that specialist knowledge when our pupils walk through the door, or prospective pupils walk through the door. What you are going to spend a lot of your life doing is contract and some tort, but mainly contract one way or another. And so that's something that you're going to have to like and be interested in, but bar that, we aren't looking for any particular experience in construction law. Our system is set up to reflect that in a sense. We test your skills during the pupillage process, and not particular knowledge, and certainly not particular knowledge of construction law. And even in terms of the legal problems we set, which we do set, they essentially are based on very on first principles. And what we're really testing is the ability to think around problems, first of all at one stage in the process in writing, and then if you make it through to the second round interview in a mock conference scenario where we ask you to play the part of a barrister giving advice to clients. And as always happens, you get knotty questions from clients, and you have to think less on your feet, but in your chair, in answering questions to the clients. And really what we are looking for is an ability to think logically, articulate your thoughts in a succinct and focused manner, to give ground where you realise that a line of thinking might not be in fact the right line of thinking, but stay firm where you're being tested on an area that you're sure on, make those judgment calls. Sometimes, or often, it doesn't really matter quite if the judgment call isn't quite right, because we wouldn't expect it to be at your stage, but it's the way that you handle that situation. And we see the difference between unnecessary intransigence, but also unnecessary flip-flopping. And in reality, you want to be somewhere in the middle of those things. So that's the knowledge side, that's the skill side, that's the intellect side that we definitely test. But I think it would be amiss also if I didn't say that Keating Chambers regards itself as one big family, and we are a big, almost always a big happy family. And if you get a tenancy at the end of pupillage, you'll become a member of the family, and hopefully you'll be a member of the family for a long time. And with that, obviously, comes some degree of fit. Now, what I should say is that that doesn't mean one size fits all. Our Chambers has a broad range of different types of people from different backgrounds, who have all come to the bar in different and interesting ways and have different styles. Some are much more intellectual and quiet, some are much more brash and adversarial, and lots of people, you're laughing at me, maybe, and we have lots of people somewhere in the middle. So what we don't mean is you have to fit into a mold, but what we do mean is you have to be an interesting person that we are going to want to spend 30 or 40 years of our family life together. And there's no set way in which you can persuade us in advance that that's what we are looking for. But it would be wrong to say, if we didn't think we wanted to spend 30 or 40 years with you as a person, then we're unlikely to be offering you a pupillage, because there is definitely that element to it as well.
Yeah, and I mean, it's very, very true that we have a huge range of people from different backgrounds in Chambers, and you and I are probably quite good examples of that, because you're quite posh, Ads, and I'm not at all. What I mean by that is that Adam,
I did come from Croydon, so
you always deploy Croydon, and it's never gonna rescue you.
Yeah, sharp edges might have been polished off a bit, but I'm Croydon by heart.
So Wenjin, I just turning back to you for a moment. The first question I was going to ask you was, you've literally just come through obviously the pupillage recruitment process, and you've ended up with us, which is obviously 10 out of 10 best possible place to end up. Have you got any tips, having just done it, for people that might be watching who are thinking about applying to the bar, whether about applying to Keating or generally? It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, so I've thought about it, and I come up with 3 tips. They may sound a bit trite, but I think they're trite for reasons because they work. The first is to be specific. Be specific in your application. And a good rule of thumb is that if you can replace the name of the set you're applying to with another set, and the answer you wrote still works equally well, then that's not specific enough. And that rule applies all the more when you're applying to a sort of specialized set like Keating is. I'm going to echo what Adam said earlier. It doesn't mean that you have to have prior experience with construction law. It doesn't mean that you have to profess your undying love for construction law in your application, but you do have to sort of show that you've thought a bit about what a practice in construction law involves and how you might be well suited for it. So that's the first tip. The second tip is to be prepared. So hopefully, if you've made it through the first stage, you're going to be invited to interview. And before interview, it's really important that you prepare. If the set gives you a piece of written work, which Keating does, then look through it again, review what you've done. You may have done it months ago, and you may be reading it and thinking, oh God, why did I think this was acceptable? You're going to have to come to terms with it and remember what you wrote and be ready to defend it. But equally, as Adam said, be ready to concede points and admit where you were wrong, if that's something that does turn up.
That is an excellent tip, Wenjin. And the number of times we have people coming to interview who you ask them what really should be an opportunity for them to show off by saying, oh, well, in your application form, you've said that you were on a mini and you really enjoyed this particular skeleton argument that you had to write. Tell us about what the issues were on that. Or you say, you said you're really interested in this case. Tell us about that case. And people have forgotten because they haven't prepared for the interview. And I always say this when I'm talking to candidates. Look at your, as you say, look at the work you've done. If it's a piece of written work, look at your application form and remind yourself what you said. Because if I hand you a gift on a plate by saying, tell us about this case that you're so interested in, you can't tell me, you've lost an opportunity that was very easy to impress the panel.
Exactly. It's a very big thing, but yeah, I think it bears repeating. Yeah, so the written work, obviously, if they give you a piece of written work, you have to be prepared on that. But equally, like Lucy said, be prepared on your CV in general. If there's any point that's written in your CV, you should be prepared to talk about it.
Yeah.
And actually, in my interview, the first interview, I can't remember if either of you were there, but there was a question about a small point on my CV that was about 3 or 4 years old at the time. And I couldn't remember.
But you had the exact experience.
Yeah, so I have this experience, and I'm speaking from the heart here. Don't make the same mistake I did. It worked out well in the end, but it may not. So yeah, it's good to be prepared. And I suppose the final tip that I have is to be yourself. So obviously, lots of applicants are qualified. Lots of applicants have the skills necessary to be a barrister. But like Adam said, it's about seeing whether you fit with Chambers, and it's about making sure that you're the sort of person that would be good to work with for extended periods of time. And I think in Keating's application process, there's a very good opportunity to do this, because in the second round interview, there's a presentation that you can do on a topic of your choice. You can be about anything you want. And I'd actually advise you not to talk about law at this stage, but use that opportunity to sort of demonstrate what sort of person you are.
Absolutely. Listening to those 3, it seems to me, brilliant tips. There is an enormous echo between, and perhaps this is unsurprising when you think about it, between what you have to do to perform well in pupillage process and being a good advocate. I do a talk for Inner Temple young barristers on 10 top tips to be a good advocate. And 3 of the 10 tips are focused, preparation, and be yourself.
Can you send me your top 10?
You've got to think of the other 7 yourself.
Oh, collegiate family.
Yeah, of course. Come along to the lecture.
Yeah, no, all right, I will. So Wenjin, the next thing I was going to ask you about was, I know that a lot of people who are attending the fairs are asking us about what we're doing in the horrible pandemic end times that we're going through at the moment. So obviously things in Chambers are a bit weird. I can see that we're both in Chambers because I recognise your pupil supervisor's door. And Adam's obviously working from home. Could you just sort of give me a little sort of summary of how we've arranged things? I mean, obviously I know, but for the people who are watching, how we've arranged things in Chambers, hopefully with the aim of it not being like being on the Mary Celeste.
Well, I suppose the first thing I have to stress is that I'm coming into work, but there was no pressure to do so. And it was made clear to me on the first day that if I wanted to work from home, I could. So the option is there. But I think Chambers has put in place measures that give pupils the option of coming in or working from home, and having both be equally as educational and as whole an experience as pupillage should be. So there's a lot of barristers, obviously, that are working from home right now. So Chambers is a bit more quiet than I think it normally is.
Yeah.
But, well, we've all been given a secondary supervisor to help with that. So on a day like today, when my supervisor isn't in and I'm working on a piece of work and I need some help on it, I can always go upstairs, knock on the door of my secondary supervisor, who will be in, and they've been chosen specifically because they are coming in during this time, and I'll have someone to talk to. And equally, I think I've also been given a secondary room, which is Adam's room.
Yeah, you have. Yeah.
Very nice room, Adam.
It's
very
just
nice.
full of boxes at the moment, Wenjin, I think.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, I've got rid of the boxes. I hope.
Yeah.
We have to move the piano to make sure you've got room.
Yeah, so there are measures like that in case, you know, I don't feel comfortable sitting so close to my supervisor, but that issue hasn't cropped up yet. So I think there are measures in place to make the experience, you know, as educational and informative as pupillage should be. And I can do this either from home or at Chambers. The choice is up to me.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I think that's it. I think we can wind up. Thank you, Wenjin. Thanks, Ads.